I'm going to talk to you about the island of Borneo. Indonesia, of course, has something like 3/4 of the island of Borneo, but it's worth referring to this extraordinary island as a single entity, because even if you didn't have 17,000 other islands, this is a spectacular example of unity in diversity, all in one astounding island. And you may remember that during the last ice age, about 12,000 years ago, you could walk from mainland Asia over to Sumatra, down to Java, across to Borneo, all the way to the easternmost side of it. But then you could go no further, because there is a massive tectonic plate dividing Asia from the rest of the islands of the Moluccas. And so it is a very contained and wonderful area, this Borneo. It is the oldest forest in the world. It's believed to be about 140 million years old, which has given all sorts of extraordinary local species of plants and animals time to evolve into their own particular forms. Of course, it was first visited, we think, in the very early days by Homo erectus, and it was there too that we find the remains of the ancestor of the orang-utan, which is Gigantopithecus, which is an animal very similar to an orang-utan, but he was 8 and 9 feet tall. But early humans used to eat him, though you would have thought it would be the other way round. And then you have indications of Islam coming there in the 15th century. And then, of course, we had the Portuguese and the Dutch and the English all fighting each other for the treasures of that part of the world. But the indigenous people of Kalimantan, which is the 3/4 Indonesian part of this island, are an extraordinary people unto themselves. There are 200 different tribes of Dayaks, as they're called, and nearly all of them hunted heads, except for one extraordinary tribe, the nomadic Punan Dayaks, as they're called south of the border. North in the Malaysian states, they're called Penins. But they are the last vestiges of the nomadic tribes who did not believe in hunting heads. They had a god of love. And so they withdrew from the rivers, which are the main thoroughfares through the jungle of Borneo, and they made it into the deep interior, where over hundreds of generations they became the great masters of the natural substances of the interior, which they in turn gave to the other Dayak tribes. So I spent a long time amongst these people. We tried to find if they were still around in their nomadic form with my brother and I in the 1980s. And the only way to get into Borneo is up the rivers. And the only way to get into the heart of the rivers, of course, is during the rainy season, which is also the season of insects. One of the reasons why it remained so little explored until recent times, because it was so dangerous and uncomfortable, except for the Dayak people, who are masters of canoes, also great artists. Some of the finest art, ethnographic art of Indonesia, is from the Dayaks of Kalimantan. Now, Kalimantan's highest mountain would be Mount Kinabalu. It's actually just across the border. You have 2 Malaysian states in the north there. You have Sarawak and you have Sabah, and you have the very small independent state of Brunei. The trouble about Borneo is it has oil and gold and diamonds, and is particularly well suited to growing palm oil, which is the most valuable of the biofuels. And it is that which has rendered its forests largely reduced by about 70% over only the last 30 years. But fortunately, you cannot deforest the sides of the mountainous region, because there are no longer rivers up there that are wide enough to float the logs down and out to the coast. So there are many hundreds of miles of extraordinarily still unexplored and wonderful forest, which is a good thing, because there are hundreds and hundreds of endemic species of plants and animals. The animals most interesting is the smallest elephant in the world, which of course is the Borneo elephant, much smaller than its other counterparts of Asian elephant. It was thought until very recently that these elephants were brought in by earlier peoples, earlier civilizations, particularly those under the influence of the Majapahit Empire. But recently it's been discovered from DNA analysis that they are in fact separated from other species of Asian elephant for 300,000 years for a start. So they are their own specific species. There are only about 1,500 of them left. They're very clever, they're very smart, they're very small and very silent, and they're very special. Of course, the other extraordinary creatures of Borneo, you have the recently discovered vampire moth, which sucks blood, and it is in fact a moth. And there are stories of the world's giant leech, as big as 70 centimeters long. And so when that is full up with the blood of some large animal, it looks rather like an Australian football or a rugger ball. It can suck enough blood out of an individual human being to render them unconscious, and it does it very quietly and neatly. It's a wonderful place for insects. You've got all sorts of extraordinary varieties of insects which practice mimicry of all different types, including a spider that exactly mimics the excrement of birds. So not only is it not noticed by other birds, but the animals that go and eat birds' excrement become the victims of this particular spider. It has the world's largest plant, largest flower, I should say, that you also find in Sumatra, the Rafflesia plant, which has the stench to it of rotting flesh that attracts the flies that in turn inseminate other such plants. It has many hundreds of varieties of amazing orchids, still many which are unknown to science. And of course it is a world not only of wonderful birds, hornbills in particular, but of monkeys and apes. The famous orangutan should not be forgotten, the man of the forest. And the local people say of the orangutan that he's really another human being, a member of another tribe, but another human being. And he is treated with the respect of another human being. But they say that he wisely learned not to talk, because if he did talk, he would only be put to work like the rest of us. Now, we can't talk about the wonders of Kalimantan without briefly mentioning how much of it is being destroyed and how fast. But there is still an enormous amount of it which we as visitors, as tourists, of people who want to get a little taste of what this magical island is, can still visit. And if, for instance, you go up the small rivers in southern Kalimantan, actually southwest Kalimantan, having arrived by aeroplane to somewhere like Kalimantan, you come to what's called the Camp Liki Orang-Utan Rehabilitation Center, where Dr. Biruti Goldikas has been rehabilitating orang-utans, teaching young ones that have been taken from illegal owners, rehabilitating them back into the wild. And she's been doing that for many years. It is a wonderful place to go, and it is particularly exciting to go up these rivers in little klotoks, as they're called, these wooden boats. You can live aboard them for days and days, and you take your own food, and you will see everything you would see in a National Geographic film about the wilds of Borneo. For instance, you're going to see things like flying snakes. Flying snakes isn't the sort of snake you expect to come across every day, beautiful and clever as it is. The thing about the forests of Borneo is that they have very shallow roots, the trees there. All their energy and their life is in the forest canopy, 150, 200 feet above the surface, the floor of the forest. And it's there that you get most of the wildlife, except for elephants and orang-utans and many other things, but you have a vast ecology of living things at least 10 to 15 meters above the forest floor. And there it is sensible for things to fly, because they're escaping predators. They don't want to have to go down the tree, crawl along the forest floor and climb up another one. They want to be able to leap, sometimes great distances. So you do have flying snakes, which swim through the air like tagliatelle. You have flying frogs, which walk through the air on parachute-like feet. You have flying colugos, which are pouched animals like kangaroos. They fly, and you have flying squirrels. So a vast amount of life is still unseen by us terrestrial animals. It's going on up there in the sky of Borneo. And every time we actually don't cut the trees down in Borneo, you only have to push them over with a bulldozer. Down comes crashing all these extraordinary creatures. So don't forget, my friends, Indonesia's great treasure house, what is left of it, are the jungles and wonders of Kalimantan, the southern 3/5 of Borneo.